Well, the World Cup is, as I said, just 4 months away, and Vancouver is going to host 7 games at the tournament. But the city is facing a lot of questions around security and politics. This month, 2 city councillors will present a motion aimed at keeping U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or ICE, out of the city during the tournament. Now, the move comes amid other questions about U.S. border rules and how that could impact people's travel plans. And for more on this, we are joined by the CBC's Laurence. He is our studio director. He is also the co-producer of our series, The Pitch, Vancouver's Road to the 2026 World Cup. Good morning to you, Laurence.
Hello, Stephen.
So just to recap for us, first off, what this motion is about, what does it say?
So at its core, this motion is essentially about who gets to operate on Vancouver streets at the World Cup. Now, the motion itself asks the City of Vancouver to formally take the position that it does not want ICE operating here during the World Cup, and it also calls on the federal government to refuse ICE entry if that situation were to arise. And now this is important because Vancouver Councillor Pete Fry, who is one of the councillors behind this motion, he says that it is on the federal government. It is kind of their decision on whether, we are able to refuse ICE entry into Canada. So what's also interesting about this story, though, Stephen, is how this motion came about in the first place. So Fry says it's in response to revelations that the ICE agents in the United States would be deployed to the Winter Olympics in Italy to support the U.S. delegation there. Many Canadians, of course, have seen images of ICE agents often masked, often wearing camouflage, often armed with guns, walking through the streets of Minneapolis. In January, we saw anti-ICE protests in Vancouver following the fatal shooting of 2 U.S. citizens. And so Councillor Fry, what he's saying here is that, there's no confirmation that ICE agents will be coming up to Canada during the tournament, but this motion is essentially a proactive step. He says if the United States were to play in Vancouver at the World Cup, and if ICE agents were attached to that delegation, Council wants to make clear that it doesn't want those agents operating here.
Now that if is a big if, though, because the U.S. isn't currently scheduled to play in Vancouver at the World Cup, and I have heard the odds of that happening are very, very low. So I guess numerically, statistically, mathematically, how likely is it that the U.S. ends up playing here?
3 things must happen for the United States to play in Vancouver at the World Cup. First, the U.S. needs to finish 3rd in its group. Then they need to qualify as a best-ranked 3rd-place team. Then they must win their round of 32 match, which could be against a really strong team like Portugal. If the United States meets all those conditions, then the United States will play in Vancouver on July 7th. Now, if that leaves you completely confused, that's okay. Join the club. We're going to help you out because we've tracked down 2 experts. Daniel MacDonald and Charles Magosian are both professors of statistics at the University of British Columbia. Here's what they had to say about the likelihood of the United States playing in Vancouver.
The basics of the probability calculation is to assume that every possible outcome is equally likely for every match that's played. And once you make that assumption, then you come up with the probability of the United States playing a game in Vancouver of being a little bit less than 0.5%.
With more time, we would have built a more sophisticated model that accounts for the difference in levels between the teams.
So to recap, Daniel and Charles say their back-of-the-envelope calculation shows that about a 1 in 200 chance of the United States playing in Vancouver.
So the odds are very low, but here's the interesting thing. Doesn't the U.S. actually already have an ICE office in Vancouver?
It does. And not just in Vancouver, but also offices in Toronto, Calgary, Montreal, and Ottawa. These offices are for personnel with the Homeland Security Investigations team who work on criminal investigations. So they do not arrest people in Canada. They do not carry firearms in Canada, but they do work in partnership with Canadian law enforcement. And I did ask the federal government about this motion. A spokesperson from Canada's Border Services Agency sent me a statement. He said the agency is, quote, collaborating with border security partners in the United States and Mexico to coordinate the operational approaches during the World Cup. He also said the CBSA maintains full Canadian control over admissibility decisions. So what that is essentially saying is that we're not getting a clear picture of what specifically to expect. But either way, Vancouver City Councillor Pete Fry says he wants to be prepared.
We know that the surge in hiring of new ICE agents in the United States has meant that training has been substandard. We know that training went from 5 months for an agent to about 47 days. And I think, undertrained foreign security operatives coming to our country potentially is a problem. And I'm not suggesting that that's an inevitability, but it would be prudent of us to get ahead of it.
So Councillor Fry's motion with fellow Councillor Sean Orr will go before Council later this month.
And the presence or the potential presence of ICE isn't the only unknown factor right now. I mean, we have heard talk of boycotting the tournament because of U.S. President Donald Trump himself and his actions, because of travel restrictions and everything else that's happening in the U.S. How serious are those concerns?
Yeah, it's so interesting because when it was first announced that North America was hosting the World Cup, I think some people thought, oh, well, this will be welcomely dull in political terms.
Yes.
You have to remember in 2018, it was in Russia. In 2022, it was in Qatar. But in the last year, the United States has implemented tougher travel rules that affect fans from dozens of countries. Trump threatened to take control of Greenland. And then the president threatened to relocate World Cup matches set to be played in Boston. He said, quote, "I love the people of Boston, and I know the games are sold out, but your mayor is not good." So, there's so much uncertainty going into this tournament. And I spoke about this with Ronan Evane. He is the executive director for Football Supporters Europe, a non-profit that represents soccer fans across the continent. I asked Ronan about these issues and how people are responding, and here's what he said.
It's a perfect storm. There's the ticket prices, there's domestic political situation, there is the difficulty or the impossibility to enter the country for some nations. I mean, a lot of these concerns are US specific. FIFA is asking people to invest a lot of money, more than ever before. I mean, the tickets are on average 5 times more what they were in Qatar, and then without really knowing what to expect. So this is not a very safe investment. People also don't feel very secure in putting so much money into tickets without knowing what to expect.
So, for example, England's official LGBTQ plus supporters group, Three Lions Pride, say it will not attend the World Cup as an organized presence, citing concerns around stricter travel rules and what it calls inadequate assurances from FIFA. I also have to mention, we've heard so much in this country about concerns of going down to the United States. And even in this year alone, we heard from First Nations groups issuing travel advisories to the United States. So let's listen to a bit from CBC reporter Edziu Loverin, who was just covering that story.
Multiple First Nations in BC are urging their members to avoid travel to the U.S. Upper Nicola Band has issued a travel advisory to its members, citing fears for First Nations people amid political unrest and actions by U.S. immigration and custom enforcement.
My fear is that they will be detained and have to face the horrific detention facilities until they can get cleared. Everybody's seen in the news those detention facilities are not even good enough for a jail, let alone somewhere to house somebody until they figure out who they are.
So that was a story from CBC reporter Edziu Loverin, and although that doesn't specifically pertain to the World Cup, what it does do is highlight just the immense level of concern there is around going south of the border right now.
The FIFA, though, kind of like the IOC, they tend to march to their own drum. How seriously are FIFA officials taking those calls to boycott the tournament?
So in looking into this story, I've been in contact with communication spokespeople with FIFA, and they point out to me that the World Cup is still on course to be the most successful World Cup of all time, with more than 500 million ticket requests submitted during the random selection draw. But the group I spoke about a bit earlier, the LGBTQ group in the United Kingdom, they said they've been upset with the inadequate response from FIFA in the face of these concerns. And what the FIFA spokesperson pointed me to is that, FIFA, is not responsible for those problems. So, for instance, holding a World Cup ticket does not guarantee the issuance of a visa or admission to Canada, Mexico, or the United States. And if you are a ticket holder but fail to obtain the necessary visa or travel authorization, you will not be entitled to any form of compensation from FIFA ticketing. So, yeah, there are those concerns. FIFA says it's still, despite the concerns, it's still going to be a massive success. I put this, though, to Canadian head coach Jesse Marsh. He was in Vancouver recently for a coaching event, and he says he understands why people have concerns, but he hopes that will not stop people from visiting Canada.
As much as we don't all necessarily agree with the politics of what's going on in the U.S. right now. I think still the opportunity to have the biggest World Cup ever and have more diversity in terms of the nations that will be represented and a bigger tournament in general. Like, we have to find a way to make this an incredible experience for everyone. And then if you want to spend more time in Canada, we'll take you, because it's going to be really nice up here, and the venues that we have are going to be amazing, and the cities that we have are going to be amazing.
All of that aside, though, Laurence, we know that Vancouver Mayor Ken Sim has been a huge booster of the games. What does he have to say about all of this?
The mayor is another person who is asking people to decouple the love of the game, which unites people, from the geopolitical events of what is going on in the world. That's what Ken Sim has said. He thinks the World Cup has a chance to unite people and show the world that communities have a lot more in common than what divides us. And he wants this event to still be a massive success. And at this stage, we still have many outstanding questions for FIFA and Canadian government officials. We'll keep you posted when we have that information.
Laurence Watt, thank you so much.
Thank you.
That is Laurence Watt, our show director, also co-producer of The Pitch, Vancouver's Road to the World Cup. And if you want to hear more on how Vancouver is prepping for the World Cup, head over to our podcast. It's called This is Vancouver, and we upload 3 new episodes every week, Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays.